What are entities, familiars, and attachments? Welcome back. I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and this is the Occult Families How to Spot Them series. Trigger warning. This video series covers disturbing and very serious topics. Full legal disclaimer in the video description below. In ritual families, most spiritual contracts are enforced by something unseen. These enforcers are not always dramatic. They don't need to roar or levitate furniture to be real. The most effective spiritual parasites operate quietly, subtly, and legally through spiritual consent, ancestral vows, or generational openings. To identify them, you need to understand the three primary categories: entities, familiars, and attachments. Entities are autonomous spiritual beings, conscious, strategic, and often contracted to maintain a system. These may include demons, shadow spirits, trickster intelligences, and other non-human forces that function as security guards for ritual grids. In bloodline systems, entities are often passed down, assigned to watch a particular branch of the family, or installed to protect a curse. They don't always appear monstrous. Some present as helpful guides or intuition. But if that guidance leads to energetic collapse, sabotage, or fear-based decision-making, it's not intuition. It's enforcement. Entities thrive in legal structures. They stay tethered as long as the contract is active. That contract may have been made by a great-grandparent who invoked a spirit for protection, revenge, or power, and paid with future blood. As long as no one revokes that contract, the entity has a legal right to remain. Your exhaustion, your illness, your sabotage may be the interest payment on a deal you never agreed to, but still fulfill. Familiars are spirit beings that attach specifically to individuals or family lines, often disguised as helpers or protectors. In folklore, familiars are known as animals, spirits, or even objects with intelligence, used by witches or shamans for ritual work. In bloodline systems, familiars can be inherited like heirlooms. A grandmother's watcher may become the daughter's spirit guide, then the granddaughter's imaginary friend. These are not random. They are assigned roles, often with specific energetic functions, keeping a person docile, redirecting spiritual gifts, or monitoring behavior. The danger of familiars lies in their familiarity. They mimic comfort. They whisper in the voice you trust. They give just enough psychic feedback to seem useful, while silently reinforcing the original contract. Many gifted children in occult families report hearing voices, seeing helpers, or having invisible friends who told them what to do. This isn't always mental illness. It's often a sign that the child was already marked, already assigned a handler. Attachments are lower-level parasitic energies that cling to the aura and feed on trauma, fear, or emotional chaos. Unlike entities, which are often contractual, or familiars, which are assigned, attachments can be picked up circumstantially, after ritual exposure, sexual trauma, drug use, violent environments, or astral interference. Attachments don't just follow people. They embed into energetic weaknesses, like a virus hiding in a wound. In ritual families, attachments are often the first layer. They create chaos, open vulnerabilities, and set the stage for deeper possession. Many are seeded through ritual sex, medical abuse, or emotional betrayal in childhood. Once an attachment is in place, it alters behavior, perception, and energy flow. You may feel not like yourself, emotionally reactive, physically drained, or drawn to self-destructive patterns. These aren't just habits. They are symptoms of spiritual invasion. Understanding the difference between these enforcers matters, because the removal process is not one-size-fits-all. Entities must be confronted legally. Familiars must be identified and banished by name. Attachments must be cleared through spiritual detox, trauma integration, and energetic sovereignty. This isn't about fear, it's about clarity. Because when someone in a ritual family suddenly changes, becomes unrecognizable, or acts violently out of character, it's not always them acting. It's often what's riding them. That's where we go next, into the layered phenomenon of hosting and possession. What happens when the body is no longer under full human command? Hosting and possession. In ritual families, possession rarely looks like the movies. There's no spinning head or guttural growl. Instead, it shows up in micro-expressions, sudden personality shifts, inexplicable emotional outbursts, or that uncanny moment when someone you love looks at you, and it's not them looking back. You feel it in your gut. Something else is present. Possession is not always dramatic. In fact, the most dangerous kind is subtle, sustained, and socially camouflaged. It's a long-term hosting arrangement where the body remains functional, but the consciousness driving it has shifted. These arrangements are not always chosen, but in bloodline systems, they are rarely random. Possession becomes infrastructure, a way to keep the curse alive and the system intact. There are two primary layers of this phenomenon: hosting and full possession. Hosting is the most common form, when a spiritual entity lives inside or alongside a human without fully taking over. The person still functions, still appears normal, but their reactions are altered, their emotions are amplified or numbed, and their decisions start to reflect something foreign. You'll notice moments of sudden rage, disassociation, or intrusive behavior that seems disconnected from reality. The host may even hear internal instructions, voices that sound like intuition, but consistently lead to sabotage, conflict, or shame. In ritual bloodlines, hosting often begins in childhood. A child experiences abuse or trauma that creates an opening. An entity, often one tied to the family line, enters and settles in. Over time, the host becomes the personality. The original self may remain buried but unreachable. That's why you can't talk sense into someone who's being hosted. Their behavior isn't rooted in logic, it's enforced by spiritual programming. Full possession happens when the human consciousness has either vacated or been completely overridden. This is rarer but deeply destabilizing. It can occur during ritual, during extreme trauma, or in moments of total energetic collapse. The possessed person may black out, lose memory, speak in unfamiliar voices, or act with strength, skill, or knowledge they don't normally have. In families where ritual is normalized, possession is sometimes used as a channeling tool, celebrated as divine connection. But what's actually occurring is a temporary or permanent surrender of sovereignty. Possession is often rotational. That means multiple spirits may move through one person, especially during specific lunar phases, holidays, or trauma anniversaries. These spirits have contracts. They come with assignments. Some are watchers, some are punishers. Some are used to block love, success, or spiritual growth, not just for the host, but for anyone who interacts with them. That's why you may feel physically ill, emotionally drained, or spiritually violated after spending time with a family member who's hosting. You weren't engaging with the human. You were engaging with the entity riding them. And those entities feed on attention, reaction, conflict, and proximity. The more you try to fix, help, or argue, the more energy they absorb. One of the hardest truths for survivors of ritual families is this: some people you love are no longer fully there. They have been fragmented, overridden, or spiritually hijacked for so long that the original self has gone quiet. This doesn't mean there's no hope, but it does mean you can't treat them like they're operating with full agency. You're dealing with a system, one designed to protect itself. Recognizing possession is not judgment, it's discernment. When you can name it, you stop personalizing the attacks. You stop trying to negotiate with a presence that was never yours to manage. And you start reclaiming the energy you've been losing to spirits that never had a right to it. Next, we'll examine how these spirits are assigned across generations, through what are known as bloodline familiars and watchers, the hidden custodians of family-level control. Bloodline spirits. Not all spirits enter randomly. In ritual families, many spirits are assigned at birth. These are known as bloodline familiars or watchers, entities bound to specific family lines with specific roles. They operate like spiritual handlers, monitoring, influencing, and sometimes controlling the trajectory of individuals within the bloodline. These spirits are not attached because of personal decisions made in this lifetime. They are inherited, passed down just like DNA, heirlooms, or surnames. A bloodline familiar is a spirit that lives alongside a family system for generations. Some are intentionally summoned through ritual. Others arrive through unbroken contracts made by ancestors. They're often described as protective, but that protection is conditional. The spirit protects the system, not the individual. If a family member deviates from the assigned path, the familiar may punish or redirect them back into alignment. This can look like illness, accidents, failed relationships, lost jobs, or emotional spirals that only appear when someone starts to awaken or rebel. These spirits may not present as malicious. In fact, many appear helpful, nurturing, or even divine. That's by design. In occult systems, a familiar often acts as the trusted voice, the one who whispers advice, appears in dreams, or guides rituals. The danger is that the advice serves the contract, not your sovereignty. What feels like intuition may be reinforcement of the curse. Assigned watchers are slightly different. While familiars live within the field and can influence behavior from inside, watchers remain at the edge of the aura or home, observing, reporting, and maintaining energetic boundaries. Their job is to prevent escape. If you've ever felt the sensation of being watched with no one there, or if every attempt to break free from family dynamics is followed by an eerie string of synchronicities, sudden breakdowns, or psychic attacks, there's likely a watcher in play. These spirits can occupy physical objects, mirrors, photos, heirlooms, even rooms in the house. Children often see them first. They may describe the man in the corner, the woman with no eyes, or the voice in the closet. These are not imaginary friends. They are assignments. In many cases, each child in a ritual family is assigned a specific familiar. Sometimes this is formalized through a naming ritual, baptism, or dedication ceremony. Other times, it's less visible, transferred through gifts, prayers, or secret blessings. These assignments can define the child's role in the family system. One may be assigned the nurturer role, another the scapegoat, another the spiritual gatekeeper. The spirit enforces that role by guiding or sabotaging accordingly. You may notice that certain relatives act as spiritual twins, repeating the same traumas, personality traits, or fates across generations. These patterns are often familiar-driven. The same spirit rides through the line, inhabiting different bodies over time. That's why some great-grandmothers and granddaughters feel eerily similar, or why a deceased aunt seems to reappear in a younger cousin. These aren't just genetic echoes, they are spiritual ones. One of the most difficult realizations is that bloodline spirits often oppose healing. When you begin the work of disentanglement, cutting cords, changing your name, discarding heirlooms, or exposing family secrets, the spirits assigned to your field may retaliate. This can appear as nightmares, sudden health issues, technology interference, or behavioral shifts in relatives who never supported your awakening. You are not imagining it. These are coordinated responses from an embedded spiritual infrastructure that is programmed to preserve the curse. To navigate this, you must stop treating your energetic field as neutral territory. If you came from a ritual family, your field was pre-wired. The voices you hear, the urges you feel, and the dreams you remember may all be signals from these spirits. Until you consciously evict and revoke their access, they will continue to operate, because in their system, you are their assignment. The good news, they only stay as long as the contract is active. And contract breaking begins with awareness. Once you identify the spirit's purpose, origin, and method of influence, you can begin to dismantle its access, removing the generational structure it once protected. Next, we'll break down how entity feeding works, and why your unhealed trauma is not just a wound, but a power source for these spiritual systems. Entity feeding entities don't attach just to haunt, they attach to feed. Every wound, every contract, every repeated trauma becomes an energetic food source. In ritual families, this isn't random, it's strategic. The system is designed to produce, preserve, and harvest emotional energy. That energy becomes sustenance for the spirits, familiars, and forces assigned to your bloodline. What do entities feed on? High-charge emotional states. Fear, rage, grief, shame, guilt, and despair are the most potent. These emotions, when sustained or triggered in cycles, create surges of loose energy that can be siphoned directly from the body and field. That's why abuse is often ritualized, why trauma is repeated generationally, and why cycles of collapse feel so predictable. The system wants you activated, but powerless, emotionally inflamed, but spiritually contained. The feeding can be ongoing, subtle, and completely normalized. If you feel a constant pull toward chaos, drama, or emotional spirals, especially around certain people, dates, or memories, you may be experiencing harvest loops. These loops are not just psychological, they are spiritual events, timed and engineered to reopen wounds that bleed energy. You're not getting triggered, you're getting tapped. Entities also feed through dreams. Nightmares, sleep paralysis, or recurring traumatic scenarios serve as energy extractions. When you wake up exhausted, anxious, or spiritually disoriented, it's not just poor sleep. You were energetically accessed during rest. If you consistently feel worse after sleep than before, you're likely being harvested in the astral realm. Some people become what's known as field generators. These individuals, often the most gifted or empathic members of a bloodline, produce enormous energetic output. But instead of being empowered by that energy, it gets redirected. If you've ever wondered why your best efforts yield collapse, or why your creative bursts get followed by depression or sabotage, this may be why. Your field is being mined, not just used, but stolen. The presence of entities often amplifies symptoms like brain fog, chronic fatigue, emotional dysregulation, and addiction. These are side effects of energetic depletion. You're not weak, you're being drained. And in many cases, the draining was installed long before you understood what energy even was. Entity feeding can also happen through confession rituals. In occult families, children are often encouraged, or forced, to speak their private thoughts, sins, or fears in ritual settings. This honesty is then weaponized. The emotional charge of guilt or shame produced in those moments becomes food. That's why many survivors feel a deep aversion to vulnerability. It was turned into a sacrifice. Even physical symptoms can be tied to energetic feeding. Pain in the womb, heart, throat, or back often coincides with portals of entry. These aren't random ailments. They're signs of spiritual extraction. And when those symptoms flare up around anniversaries, family gatherings, moon phases, or other ritual windows, you're likely witnessing the system at work. Here's the critical insight. Entities cannot feed without access. That access is granted through contracts, trauma loops, open doors, and passive agreement. The more unresolved emotion you carry, the more entry points they have. The more hidden your wounds, the easier they are to tap. And the more unaware you remain, the longer the feeding continues. But once you see the pattern, once you name the mechanism, the siphoning begins to weaken. Awareness is the first leak in the dam. You were not born to be food. You were not created to power a system that thrives on your suppression. You are not the battery, you are the breaker. Next, we'll explore spiritual eviction, how to identify embedded entities and remove what was never yours. Spiritual eviction. You cannot negotiate with what was never supposed to be there. Once you've identified the signs of entity feeding, possession, or contract-based attachment, the next step is not appeasement. It is eviction. You do not reclaim your life by healing what does not belong to you. You reclaim it by expelling the foreign structures that hijacked your energy, voice, and trajectory. Spiritual eviction is the process of identifying, confronting, and removing entities, attachments, contracts, or inherited energies that are operating without consent. But effective eviction isn't just about casting something out. It's about severing access, closing the door it entered through, and revoking the spiritual agreement that allowed it to anchor in the first place. There are 3 key truths you must understand before initiating eviction. You cannot evict what you protect. Many people remain attached to the very energies they want removed because they have normalized the relationship. They feel guilt, fear, or even loyalty toward the entity, especially if it presented as a protector, helper, or familiar spirit. But if it violates your will, siphons your energy, or reinforces bondage, then it's not helping, it's harvesting. You cannot evict what you defend. The first step is clarity. Stop justifying the interference. You cannot evict what you do not name. Entities, contracts, and attachments often hide behind vagueness. If you're just feeling off or having bad luck, you're dealing with symptoms, not the source. Spiritual eviction requires naming the mechanism. What entered? When? Through what doorway? Was it a ritual, a relationship, a trauma, a gift, a bloodline agreement? Precision is power. Once you name the entry point, you can address the system supporting it. You cannot evict without replacing the structure. Nature abhors a vacuum. So does the spiritual realm. When you remove a contract, spirit, or familiar, you must replace its role with divine order. That means reclaiming your own authority and anchoring a new framework, one built on sovereignty, protection, and alignment. If you remove the parasite but don't heal the wound it fed on, another will take its place. Effective eviction involves legal language, not just emotional plea. Contracts must be revoked in spoken declarations. Think of this not as prayer, but as a court proceeding. You are standing in spiritual authority, stating that you rescind all unconscious, inherited, or imposed agreements with any entity, force, or lineage that violates your free will. The words must be your own, but the tone must be clear. You do not consent. Eviction also involves energetic clearing. That may include purging cursed objects, cleansing spaces with fire, smoke, or sound, and closing physical or psychic portals that were being used for access. If you know something entered through a dream, relationship, or altar, then that doorway must be specifically closed. Vague cleansing will not disrupt a precise mechanism. In ritual families, eviction often requires lineage-level revocation. That means rejecting roles that were assigned before you were born. If your position in the family was determined by ritual, contract, or expectation, and you were energetically groomed to host or carry something, then eviction demands the rejection of that identity. This is more than inner child work. This is spiritual rebellion. You are not who they said you were, and you will not carry what they installed. Be prepared for backlash. When you evict, the system often fights back, especially if it's been feeding off your energy for decades. You may feel exhausted, disoriented, or emotionally raw. You may dream of the entity, or receive signs that the structure is retaliating. Stay firm. Do not re-agree through fear. Do not open the door through doubt. Repeat the revocation. Stand on it until it holds. And remember, you are not alone. The very act of awakening to this structure is proof of your authority over it. Parasites only survive in darkness. Once they are named, they lose ground. Once the contract is revoked, they lose claim. And once you replace the void with clarity, strength, and alignment, you become unhostable. Spiritual eviction is not the end of your healing. It's the beginning of your return. Your energy, your voice, your field, all of it, fully yours again. Hi, I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and what you just watched is part of my signature program, the Chosen One series inside School of Soul. This series is not just a course, it's a blueprint for those who know they were different from the start. The black sheep, the scapegoat, the truth teller, the cycle breaker. Inside, you'll discover the family roles playbook, the golden child, the scapegoat, the enabler, the lost child, and how to finally step out of the part you were cast in without consent. How the black sheep becomes the goat, turning rejection into radical transformation and leadership. How to break generational curses and rewrite ancestral contracts so the pain stops with you. And how to recognize and escape modern forms of spiritual and technological targeting, from gang stalking to synthetic synchronicity. This isn't just about survival. It's about awakening. About reclaiming your voice, your lineage, and your destiny as one of the chosen ones. Click the link below to access the full series now, because the role ends the moment you decide it does, and the real script begins with you.